Hey, just the person I was looking at in Slack. Hey, Ariel.
Hey, I did you see that error message?
I'm looking at it right now. Did you get it figured out?
No, it says public key, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I think yeah. So Git can work one of two ways. It can use SSH keys or it can use username and password. I think yours is set up with. Oh, is this app private?
It's my capstone. It should be public.
So the dating dash app is public?
It should be, but I'm wondering if maybe it's not. I mean, I was able to clone it back and forth to myself. I can check real quick.
What was the command you used to run the clone? Did it have like a git at? Hello, Tony.
What was the what I used? I'm sorry.
What was the command you used to clone?
Git clone.
Git clone, what was the URL?
Hold on. Wait, what are we doing this evening? Because if it's easier, I'll just switch to the MacBook for tonight for Zoom, and then I can send you whatever I need to.
Tonight we're going through a bunch of miscellaneous stuff. We're gonna
Okay,
install some monitoring.
let
Go
me
ahead.
hop on the MacBook quick then and try that.
Okay. Cobelia, I apologize. Yesterday I didn't end up coming back to you, and I said I would. Did you
No problem. I understand.
did
They
you
gave me
get
more time to get ready, so
okay?
I think everything is installed. At
Okay,
least
great.
the Heroku, I believe it's installed.
Okay, great. Let's see. We might have time in class today to work a little bit on it, but if we don't, if you come to office hours, or
Definitely.
maybe do you want to just do a? Do you have some free time later this week to?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll shoot you a message.
Okay. Thanks.
Ariel, when you clone, it'll give you two options. You could do SSH or you could do HTTPS, and you're doing the SSH. Try using the HTTPS. Does that make sense? Yep, exactly. And I'll just share my screen really quick for. So if you go to a repo and hit code, there's a toggle here. You have to do some special stuff in order to get set up with SSH. And personally, I like SSH a bit better than using HTTPS. But I think most people are set up to do HTTPS. So when you do a clone, make sure you grab this HTTPS. And then if anybody's curious for office hours, I could talk about doing SSH. SSH is a lot better because you don't have to add, or sorry, you don't have to type in your username and password if it's private. Give like 3 more minutes. You guys got career coaching tomorrow? What's tomorrow? You guys get the day off? Are you doing something cool? It's off? Oh, nice. You don't have to think about computers for an evening. Very cool.
So Nathan, this is Latonia. The miscellaneous stuff, is that the bonus stuff you said you were going over, or did you decide on other stuff? It is the bonus stuff.
Yeah, it's the bonus stuff. I'm going to go over a smattering of things tonight. This is content that I was going to originally teach, and then I've reworked, and then it's been reduced down to purely show and tell. So I'm going to go through a bunch of little things.
So we won't be following along in like the terminal or anything.
There's one section that you guys might want to follow along in,
Okay.
depending on if you think it's valuable. But for most of it, it's to get people familiar with these concepts. In fact, what I'm really hoping is that when you land your software engineering jobs and somebody throws some of these terminology words at you, you'll have an idea of what they mean. And some of it's just fun stuff. We're at the end of the module. I think DevOps is a blast, so I just want to share some of it with you.
I was wondering if you could also cover how to commit like just individual files or folders in like when we were doing it in the terminal, commit them to GitHub rather than the whole project, because sometimes I want to put different comments on different parts of the project or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Carolyn yesterday asked for me to put a list of all the commands we've used together. I think I've covered all those in the slide. So if you take a look at the very end, I've tried to detail all of the commands we've used and what they do. So use that for reference, but we'll go through them and I'll be sure to, well, actually, you make sure to stop me on that git add. MDN for JavaScript? Or
I was thinking terminal. I'm sorry, I must have been listening wrong.
yeah, no, for
I thought I
terminal,
got a
yeah.
list, or I thought I got a list from MDN when we were way back when we first started.
Oh.
I was able to find a really nice list and print it out of the commands and stuff. So.
Oh, cool.
Hey, Nathan.
Hey.
This yesterday after we moved our front-end files, so I'm kind of getting an error when I run the front end. The backend node one, I can run that, it works, but front end. So I did npm init and -y. I also did npm install, didn't work. So I removed the package.json rm-rf, reinstalled it, and then got an error. The start script is not there. I added that, but still I get the same error, says the stack is missing something.
Did your front end use Create React App?
No, it's JavaScript.
Oh, okay. I was about to freak out because I was like, you do not want to blow away parts of Create React App. Yeah. Hey, let's work on it after class.
Sure. Sounds good.
I will definitely help get that fixed. Did everybody use Namecheap to get their domain names? Cool. That's gonna make tonight really easy. All right, let's jump into it. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to just do a really quick recap of where we are right now. So our goal, get code in front of customers. Yesterday, we went through deploying a whole bunch of stuff. I hope that we're closer today than we were yesterday in terms of getting our code in front of whatever your customer is, if that's future employers, if that's actually people because you're selling stuff. Whatever it is, I hope that I helped get you a little bit closer to that goal. So we talked about deploying the front end. We kind of glossed over the other providers. So we really honed in on Heroku because Heroku is pretty simple and got us where we needed to get to quickly. At the end, if we have time, I'm going to talk a little bit about Amazon Web Services and do kind of a show and tell with that. Talked about front end, went through all these different instructions. I introduced a slide here. So again, for the folks that aren't using Create React app, this slide is for you. So this is going to help you set up a build pack for static files. Just follow the instructions really carefully. And then yesterday's video, we did, I think two folks had static files. So you have resources available. And if you run into any problems, just shoot me a message. And then we talked a little bit about deploying our backend. Now, I just want to gauge really quick in chat of the folks that have backends. So if you don't have a backend, don't put anything in chat. Of the folks that do have backends, how many of you still need to deploy your backend? Okay. So we've got a couple folks that need to deploy a backend. All right. So we'll work on that. I think we'll have some time today, in fact, to work on deploying a couple backends. So we should be, after we leave class today, we should have folks with their backends deployed. All of us, though, on Tuesday went through the example of deploying Nathan's backend store. So that video is up if you want to take a look at that. That's all the backend stuff. Then we talked about deploying Postgres and how you need to go into Postgres for whatever your backend is, search in the add-ons for Postgres, enable it for your backend. Then I have some instructions here. This is for PG if you're using direct queries in your Node.js app. I know some folks are using SQLize. If you're using SQLize, this looks a little bit different, how you would connect to your Postgres instance on Heroku. I'm actually going to throw Latonia out there because Latonia has the setup for SQLize. She's running SQLize in her backend and knows how to connect to the Heroku Postgres. So if you have questions, feel free to ask Latonia because she knows now, or ask me, either one of us. Here's your reference sheet for working with Postgres for the folks that are doing so. I also detailed these again at the end of the slide. So if you want a handy dandy reference for working with Postgres on Heroku, that's where it is. And then we talked a little bit about front end and back end communication. I think we still need to exercise this a little bit more to bring home the concept, but we'll get there. And then these slides were for communicating between the front end and the back end through M files. I realize this is a little bit advanced using environment variables to find what services to talk to. So for now, just consider this as reference in the future if you need it. And for your capstones, it would probably make sense to just directly call into your front end and back end. Okay. So for today, I want to have a little bit of fun and I want to go through just some of the last little cleanup items we have and also just share some general DevOps knowledge. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get Namecheap hooked up with Heroku. And this is really simple. So if you have a domain name on Namecheap and you want to link it to your front end, I'm presuming, in Heroku, all you do is go to your Heroku dashboard, find your front end. I actually have my own website called Django Best Practices. I'm going to use that as my example here. This is a front end. And I bought the domain djangobestpractices.com. So if you have a domain name you want to associate with your Heroku website, you go into settings. And then there's a section here for domains. And you just click add domain. Then you enter in whatever your domain name is and hit enter. So for the folks that have domain names, please go into your Heroku front end, add your domain, whatever it is, nathanscapstone.com. So add whatever your domain name is and save it in here.
And about the line for SSL certificate, because I have an HTTPS website. So do I need to put something in there besides the default thing? Is there something on my domain name that I need to get that information from or whatever?
Now let me back up and look at an app that doesn't have a domain already configured. So if you go to add domain, yeah, don't put anything into the SSL certificate box.
Okay, thanks. I need to get another domain name separately for my capstone probably too, because what you're teaching us to do is going to make that be the front, like the only thing on the website. It's going to appear at the index, right? So if I wanted to
Yep.
do kind of like a portfolio type of thing on my website with my name that we got at the beginning. Okay.
You probably want to split that off to another, yep.
If we wanted to deploy smaller projects additionally, like as part of the portfolio, is there a way to not deploy those to another new domain name and kind of include it, just put it somewhere on your our name website? Or
Yeah, yes, it gets tricky with Heroku because Heroku is really built for a simple use case, which is I have an app, I have a domain, put the two together. If you wanted to do, it's entirely possible to do what you're talking about, and most enterprise companies do what you're saying. They use one domain and that goes to many different projects via the URL. Heroku is not set up to do that kind of advanced stuff, unfortunately. So for the folks that have domain names, were you able to enter them into your front end? This is step one. Oh, it's asking for a credit card. Yeah. That's unfortunate. Does the free tier not allow? Tony, can you share your screen really quick? Just want to make sure that you're not hitting something else. Oh, yeah, yep. Please verify your account. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it just wants a credit card to verify who you are. I don't think it's gonna charge you necessarily, but sorry guys, I didn't realize that was gonna. I already put my credit card into mine. It should be safe to put in your credit card. We're running all free instances. There's not going to be a charge in the way that we currently have stuff set up. So, and if there is a charge, like a fee or whatever, Careers and Code will obviously reimburse you for it. So if you guys can, we'll take a minute and you guys can plug it. Man, Heroku just really wants your money. That's the takeaway from this. Okay. Let's skip ahead a little bit and go ahead and sign into my name sheet.
Hey, Nathan.
Hey,
Sorry to bother this show. I get the same message. When I click on the link, it doesn't take me anywhere. And under setting, so let me try to go to billing. Where is billing? Under setting, no. Account settings, let's see if password billing. Yeah, okay, it's under billing. So we have to do it separately here. Add a credit card. All right, thank you. I'll do that.
Mhm.
Thanks.
all right. Once you have your account set up on Heroku, credit card uploaded, I guess, go ahead and open up Namecheap. Go to your domain list. Log into your account in Namecheap. Go to your dashboard, and then there should be this domain list on the side. And then click on Manage, whatever your domain name is. So you should see something like this. Bunch of knobs, bunch of different settings for your domain. I'll just pause here until, if you give me a thumbs up when you get to this page, let me know when it's time to move on.
Hey, Nathan, sorry. I was adding my credit cards. So I added the domain. It says, congratulations, your domain has been added. So what do we do next?
Go ahead and open up Namecheap, go to your dashboard. And then click on domain list.
Oh, sorry, my internet got disconnected. So I click back to domains.
Yep, so go to Namecheap where
Oh.
you own the domain.
Okay. Domain list.
And then click on whatever the domain is that you've got. Click manage. It should open this whole panel here.
Perfect. Yes, I am there. Thank you.
All right, once you're in this panel, you don't need to change anything here. The only thing you need to do is go into the advanced DNS tab. Who knows what DNS means? Has anybody ever heard of DNS before? domain name system. Yep. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell this is a overgeneralization here, but we're going to tell the internet, specifically DNS, how to resolve the domain name. So when you go to the domain that you bought on Namecheap, it's like a slot in a phone book. So Namecheap maintains all these different addresses. When someone goes to the URL and types in your website name, they're in effect going into this Namecheap phone book because Namecheap owns your domain. Going into that phone book, finding where exactly your domain name is in the phone book, and then looking at the entry next to it, just like a name and a phone number in the phone book, looking for that entry, and that entry is what we're going to write, and that entry is going to point back to Heroku. And there's a very specific way that you should set this up. There's a whole bunch of different DNS record types, and the one that we want to create is called an alias record. When you buy your domain, Namecheap will park it, which means they'll put some, I've seen them put ads on your domain name if you don't use it in a certain period of time. And the way that they do that is they will by default inject some DNS records. So when you get to this page, if you see any DNS records in there, delete them. You don't need them. We're going to only need one DNS record for our domain name. And when you're ready to create that DNS record to point to Heroku, you click Add New Record, go down and click Alias Record. And it's going to ask you for three different values. The first value for the host is the @ symbol. At in DNS terms is really a shortcut for the domain name itself. But you'll put the @ symbol in there. And then for the value, you're going to use what Heroku gave you when you created the domain. So if you go back to your settings page in Heroku, see it gave you a DNS target when you registered the domain name on the Heroku side. So you'll take that DNS target, come back into Namecheap, and paste that DNS target in here. And then in Namecheap's confusing UI, you would click this check mark over here on the end to save the record. So when you're done, you should have something that looks sort of like this, except you're going to have a slightly different value for your alias record. The TTL, the time to live, you can leave that as automatic. That just says for how long browsers should cache the DNS entry. And we're just not going to go into that today. Okay, so that's how you link up the two. Now, it's not going to be immediate. It's like all domain name operations. It's going to take like 30 minutes, although I've seen it complete in as few as 8 minutes. But at that point, you should be able to visit whatever it is that you have, and it will send you to Heroku. So that will link your front end app to it. Questions? Folks able to do this without any problems? I guess I'll check on you in 30 minutes when this finally resolves. Okay, and the instructions are here in the slide. So all you're doing is creating an alias record, setting the host to the @ symbol, and then the value to the DNS target. Okay, so that's how you link your Heroku app to your domain name. Now we're going to talk about some fun stuff. We're going to talk about monitoring. Right now, if your backend crashes on Heroku, how will you know? Check the log. That's about the only tool we have right now. The logs are really it. What about if your server has a memory leak and just continually accumulates and eats up RAM and continues to crash? How would you know about that? Yeah, exactly. We need an alert system. Right now, we're kind of flying blind. And it's the same for the front end. The front end has a server. I mean, you have static files that are being served, and on Heroku, when you're running your front end, that's also a server. It's not a Node.js server, but it's a server, so it's serving those static files. If that server blows up, how will we know? If it starts set up Cypress, that would work. You could totally set Cypress up to sit there and ping your website or run a workflow on your website every 10 minutes, every hour. That would be an alerting system. You could build that yourself for sure. There are monitoring tools. So this is where the fun part that I want to quickly go over, just so you guys know what to do if you want to take your game to the next level. I'm not expecting everybody to implement all of this for their capstone necessarily, because your capstone doesn't necessarily need this level of monitoring, but I just wanted to cover it anyways. So you've got two things that you're really looking out for. You're looking at what your hardware is doing. So we're talking the dynos that Heroku spins up for you. And then we're talking about the software, the actual code that's running out on Heroku. Right now, we don't really have insights into either of those two things. So let's start with the hardware. With Heroku, you obviously can pay them money and they'll give you more stuff. For the demo day, here's a thought: maybe switch to Hobby just to get that extra beefy server for when you go and do your demo. Just a thought. But if we go into Heroku and we look at, so I'm going to look at Nathan's backend store. You can click on resources and you can give Heroku some money and they will give you bigger, better servers. And they have a lot of different options. So when you click here on change dyno type, everybody should be on the free dyno type right now. Free is good, except for that Heroku will put your app to sleep if no one's using it, which is why I think it would be a great idea for the demo to switch to Hobby. Hobby keeps your server running all of the time. Free will put your server to sleep if no one's using it, which means that if it's asleep, someone goes to visit your capstone, it could take up to 7 to 10 seconds for the server to wake up and then respond to the request. So maybe think about switching to Hobby for the folks that have credit cards in there. So you could check out Hobby. Hobby gives you access to a dedicated, always alive, constantly running server. $7 a month. It's not a bad deal. Once you start getting into more of the professional stuff, you have more options, and that's what I have selected right here. So I have a $25 a month for a single dyno, and it's going to give me 512 megabytes of RAM. It's running on a shared instance. So you'll see that here we have shared versus dedicated. What that means is that for the shared instances, Heroku behind the scenes is really spinning up one massive server, and then they're putting a bunch of different dynos on it. That isn't bad, but it's one of the things that you see in the cheaper offerings. And one of the downsides to using a shared instance is that if your app is running on a server with a whole bunch of other apps, it's possible that one of the other apps might burst or might start consuming tons and tons of resources on that one shared server that your dyno is running on. And if that happens, it could steal resources from you. It's called the noisy neighbor problem that in Devops, where if you co-locate a bunch of different programs on the same piece of hardware, one program could steal resources from yours. But it's a lot cheaper to offer this shared model on Heroku because they can get away with selling a lot of different dynos, little processes on one box. So that's why the lower tier stuff is shared. Heroku is based on a multi-tenant architecture. These two are multi-tenant. That's what the shared is coming from. Multi-tenancy meaning that it has multiple programs living on it, multiple dynos. That is the right word to use, Shaw. Thank you for correcting me.
And
Any other
Nathan,
word? Right?
oh, I'm sorry. This is Latonia. So how would you know, you can't set up alerts for other people's stuff, right?
Mhm.
So if you're monitoring it, I guess it would just monitor that whole shared space. But I guess I'm just trying to figure out how you would know if you have a noisy neighbor in there.
A noisy neighbor, right. Heroku has protections in place to limit the noisy neighbor problem, but it still exists. And there are ways to ensure that your app is getting what you think it should. Like it should get, if we pay for a dyno for $25 a month, we should always get 512 megabytes of RAM. I will show you here in a second how to ensure that that's what you're getting. Yeah, I don't know why somebody would pay $500 a month for a dyno. At this point, you're probably a professional and you probably have graduated from Heroku, but it's there if you want to do that. And then these are giving you dedicated servers, which eliminates the noisy neighbor problem because you are the only one running on that server. Okay, so getting into a little bit of what Latonia was referring to. There is a page, once you put in the credit card, once you've switched off of free tier to hobby, free tier doesn't have this. They put this out as like a carrot on a stick for you to put in your credit card. But once you have at least the hobby tier, you can go to the metrics page. And this is how you can ensure that you're getting the resources that you're paying for. So if we look here, I can see that my quota for my server is 512 megabytes, which is what they claim that I should be getting. Now I'm only using 32 megabytes of that 512. This page will let you see how much memory your app is consuming, similar to if you are running Activity Monitor on your Mac, you can see what processes are taking up X amount of resources. This is really handy for the memory leak problem. And I don't know if you guys have encountered this, but picture in your Node.js server, picture a variable that you use to store user logins. Let's say that every time someone logs in, you store their username into a variable, a list. If you continued to store usernames into that variable, if you continue to append usernames, your memory would continue to grow linearly as users logged into your system. That's not good programming practice. You typically put something like usernames, logins into a database because a database can handle growing amounts of data. But if you were to do something like this in your Node.js app and you were just to make a variable and continue to allow it to grow, what you would see on this page is an increasing graph. And eventually, you would hit the quota. So you would eventually exhaust all of the memory, and then different parts of your app would start to degrade. Things like your endpoints would start to fail because Node.js wouldn't have any memory to start new instances and return responses from your from your app. To prevent that, you can set up different alerts here. So you can monitor the number of failing requests. So here, for example, we can set a 5% failure threshold, which means that within the duration of a minute, if 5% of the requests to your app result in a non-200 HTTP status code, so think 503s, 500s, if you receive 5% of those types of HTTP errors, this will send you an email. And it will alert you. So if it's 1 in the morning and your app is dying, you can roll out of bed and go troubleshoot. All right. Response time. 5% is just what Heroku sets up. Honestly, I think 5% would be a little. It depends. If you have a really great app that never throws any errors and is just perfect in every single way, then maybe 5% would be good. Those are numbers for you to tweak and find what you think the right spot is. The same thing goes for response time. So when we're building our services, we want response times to be extremely low. We want users to make requests to our app, get a response quickly. When it starts to take longer for users to hit our services and get a result back, that's when we start doing some debugging. Either something is taking a really long time to complete, either putting data into a database or making a network call to some other service. All of those affect this response time, and Heroku will track how long it takes for responses to return from your app to the customer. And you can see my backend store is not great. It's like 35 milliseconds, I think. But this would be useful in the context of an app that serves lots of different customers, looking at the different response times and seeing how they're trending. If response times are growing, which means it's taking longer for customers to get data from your backend, then that would be cause to investigate and find, okay, where is the bottleneck in my backend? The last graph I'm going to talk about is dyno load. Dyno load is Heroku speak for CPU. That's it. And the way that they measure CPU is on a scale of 0 to 1. My dyno type has 1 CPU core. So you can see here at 9 this morning, the dyno burst to 0.4. That's 40% CPU utilization of that 1 core. So if you see a graph like this and it's not measured from 0% to 1%, what this really means from 0 to 1 is that percent. This is based off of the percentage of CPU usage. Any questions? I threw a bunch of terms, and this is all stuff for you to play around with. I would strongly recommend switching to the hobby. Just get Careers in Code to reimburse you the $7 for the month, and check out what these metrics look like in your capstone.
Hey Nathan, this is Shai. Can I ask a quick question about this?
Sure.
So you say that if we have a variable that constantly adds something, so that will increase the memory usage.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a limit? Like you have your quota, which is 500 something or whatever it is, but within that, is there something? The reason was, let's say in this case, you have an infinite loop, like x is greater than 1 add something plus plus.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes indefinitely. So that will crush your system. So does it goes to until it hits the quota, or what? How it works?
So are you asking what happens when you hit the threshold, when you've consumed all the
Let's say
memory?
you have an infinite loop in your app
Mm-hmm.
that runs so indefinitely, so it will consume all the resources. So
Yeah.
what happens? It will run until it hit the quota, or there is something else behind the scene from Roca that there is a limit that identify, oh, this guy is at loose, so stop it.
Yeah. Scary part is I don't really know with Heroku. I know what it will do in other systems, and it not only is there's a lot of variables at play here. When you start to reach the cap of your memory limit, your language might do something funky. So Node.js itself might start to degrade. Here's the scary part. When you start to consume more resources than are allocated to your program, it may or may not blow up in a spectacular fire. The worst thing that it can do is it can slowly degrade in weird ways, such as once you start reaching the memory limit, certain API endpoints might fail. Maybe not all of them at first, maybe just a couple here and there. You might have, I've seen situations where lots of API calls are fine, but some calls that do more expensive things like go to the database and return results, those tip the memory limit over the threshold and are killed by the operating system. So out of memory exception killed. So the worst possible scenario is your app starts to degrade in really weird ways. It isn't just immediately killed by Heroku, but instead continues to live and starts to degrade in absolutely weird and unexplainable ways. The worst part about that is that if you don't know to go and look at the memory, you might think that you just have a bug in your code. You might think that the logs are showing you that that the database is down or that you have a bug in an API endpoint. So that's what I mean by you don't really know what will happen when you start to reach that memory limit. Any number of things may happen, and the worst of them is nothing really happens, but your app starts to degrade. All right. So those are the metrics that you can set up. So that's kind of the hardware side of things, how you can know what's going on with your capstone or with your product or whatever in Heroku. Okay. Before we jump into software, let's go ahead and take a quick 10-minute break because I'm going to do some coding and I want to get set up for that. So come back at 6:26. All right, welcome back. Share my screen. Okay, so we just got done talking about hardware. Let's talk a little bit about software. This is a bit more relevant to what you guys are doing. So I'm going to pose the same question. If something happens to your software, where do you go? Right now, it's purely the logs. We saw some examples of how unhelpful the logs were yesterday. We had a deploy that simply 404'd every time we tried to hit it. So the logs are good for some things, but also really hard to understand other times. So it also takes initiative to go into logs. Now, how many people have actually gone into logs since they deployed the front end yesterday? You don't have to actually answer, but just think about like how many times have you actually gone in to see how your front end is doing? It's kind of, you push it and you hope that it continues to run and not cause any issues. But that, unless you're sitting there pulling open the logs every morning while you're having a cup of coffee, it's unlikely that you're going to proactively go in there and look. And yeah, the logs are pretty bad for seeing what's going on. The other thing that logs are pretty bad at is determining the urgency. So let's pretend like your capstone is an e-commerce website and your website accepts credit card details when they're checking out. And when some user went and put their birthday into the credit card box on accident, and it throws an error. If you go to the logs, you'll see an error, and you might think, oh gosh, there's something wrong with my app. There's a critical bug going on. And you might think that it's extremely urgent. And it arguably it is, but it also could just be user error, and your system doesn't properly handle someone entering birth dates into credit card boxes. But just by looking at the logs, unless you go back and back and back in history to see how many times that error was triggered, it's really hard to understand how urgent, how many times that error has been triggered. Maybe it's just that one isolated incident. Maybe every customer is experiencing that same issue. So just by looking at the logs, it's pretty hard to understand the urgency. And the other thing about looking at the logs is, again, that reactive versus proactive. When a user goes to your capstone or your website and encounters an issue, either because your React code has something wonky or your Node.js has something wonky, if they encounter an issue, we shouldn't really wait and go crawl the logs to find out if they encountered an issue. We certainly shouldn't wait for them to tell us on Twitter or send us a bug report. We shouldn't wait to hear about problems. We should know about problems as they're happening. And a great way of doing this is a website called Sentry. Sentry's whole job is to bolt on to your application and inform you, send you alerts, similar to how Heroku will send you alerts when something's going on with your hardware. Sentry will do the same thing for your software. So I'm going to drive, but for folks that want to follow along, please feel free to. We're going to add Sentry to our backend. You can also install Sentry into your front end. And there's a guide down here for the front end, but we're going to go through the back end. So if you go and visit Sentry.io, let me log out of here first. If you go and visit Sentry.io, you'll see their whole landing page. Click on sign in or get started. Either way will take you to a page where you can sign in with, I'm signing in with Google, but you can make make a username and password on there if you so desire. Okay. Then once you're in here, this is the issues page in Sentry. And whenever your app runs into an issue, you'll get a message kind of like this. And you can see I have an error in here, and it's coming from PG protocol. So without having to go to my Heroku logs, without having to wait for a user report, I know something's wrong with how PG is connecting to the database. And you can click on this, and it will give you detailed information about what exactly is going wrong and what caused this error. It will print out this whole stack trace down here so you can dig into the exact line of code that was failing. It even includes contextual information. So if you scroll down to, well, it didn't do a great job of contextual information in this one. It simply has the name and the version. But we can see exactly where the error occurred. It happened here in PG protocol parser 287. So something going on with how we're connecting PG to our database. So that gives me a clue into what caused this error. Before any customers told me, before anybody was yelling about, hey, the database doesn't seem to be working for your app. It'll also give you a frequency. So it will tell you how many times it's seen this error. So this can tell you how urgent it is. You know, if this number is relatively low, you can choose to potentially ignore it and say, okay, we'll fix that in the next couple of weeks. If it's popping up with a high frequency, you might say, okay, we need to stop what we're doing and figure out how to fix this error. To get this set up on your Capstone is really easy. Once you've signed into Sentry, you can click on any of these setup guides, and it will pre-fill out all the instructions for you with your Sentry key. So all you really have to do is go through this tutorial step by step. So it's installing the Sentry library into your Node app. So npm install and save the Node and the tracing app. And then a little bit of code to initialize the Sentry module. All right, so I'm going to jump off of the tutorial. Feel free to look over this if you are interested in installing this in your backend, but I've already installed it in mine, so I'm going to just go jump straight to that. So I'm in the backend store. This code is pushed up. Git status. This code is pushed up to GitHub if you want to check it out as another example of adding Sentry to your app. I'll go ahead and open up the backend store really quick and show you what changes were made. Okay, so this is my server. No changes were made here to install Sentry. Okay, over in app.js, here's the magic for Sentry. So you import the Sentry library. This is your typical Node.js import. So we installed these libraries with the npm install command. Now we're now we're importing both of these modules. And then down here, right before we set up our Express app, this is from the tutorial that I had up in the browser. And all it's doing is it's taking your special Sentry key that you get when you sign up, and it's wiring it into this app. So this block is, by all intents and purposes, this block is magic. This is just how you get Sentry to work in your app. And then Sentry gets added into your Express routes. So that's what this app.use is doing. I know I've seen in a bunch of your Capstones, you guys are also using a bunch of other modules like the cores module. But this is how you would install Sentry to work with your Express app. Okay. Then if you recall from earlier this week, the backend store has an endpoint, a /items, and it just returns what items are in the store in the database. I also added another endpoint. This is the /error endpoint. I just added this for myself to demonstrate what happens when an error is thrown in this Node.js app. So when an error is thrown, we should see it pop up in Sentry. It's the whole point of installing Sentry, so we catch our errors and we know about them. Okay, and then there's one last piece of middleware that you want to install. And for the folks that are actually going to install Sentry, be aware that the order in which you apply the Sentry handlers is important, and I'll show in the documentation. Under the Express documentation, they call it out. Somewhere in here, where is it? Ah, yes. So they say here, Sentry should be initialized as early as possible in your app. So that's why we have the Sentry block up at the top before we start creating the Node.js Express app. And then they want you to define your routes. So say app.get, app.post, all of your Express routes. And then this error handler has to be added after you've defined your routes. So if you go and are installing Sentry and put this line up here instead of down here. So if you install the error handler before you define your routes, Sentry won't work. So it's just a little gotcha to be aware of with installing Sentry. Okay. Any questions so far?
Hey Nate, it's Latonia. This is a simple thing. I was actually trying to follow along, so I got into Sentry, but then I got stuck at this page where it wants you to choose your project's platform. And you may have said this and I missed it, but I was trying to pick more than one and I wasn't able to, so I just wasn't sure how to handle that.
Go with the Express tutorial.
Okay, thank you.
So are we just putting this on our back end, or should we put it on both our back end and front end?
So this isn't going to be a homework. You don't need to prove to me that you've done this. This is purely if you want to. And by all means, please follow the instructions for installing on your front end too, because catching front end errors is also really valuable. You know, the back end is just one piece of the whole monitoring picture. Very good question. And the reason why I'm not going into gratuitous detail about how to install this is their docs are great and they will take you step by step through installing these. I just want you to see the big picture of once you install it, what to expect from it, why it's so valuable. Okay. So we've got Sentry set up. We just bolted it to this app. Now let's run it. So I'm going to do node server.js. Ah, right. It's connected to my database. So I need to give it some database environment variables. So if you recall here in the setup for connecting to the database, it's looking for a user, a name, a password, and a host in order to find where the database is located. So I'm passing all of those in as environment variables. There we go. Actually, I'm curious. I wonder if this was caught by Sentry. Let's go see. I can move that. There we go. Sure enough, 46 seconds ago, it recorded the error that my Node app encountered standing up. Now these are coming from my local computer, but what is interesting here is that it's marked it as a regression. Have you guys heard the term regression before in terms of software bugs? Yes, you can set alerts. Absolutely. There is a whole alerting page here where you can create rules about how many errors you want to, how many errors you're willing to accept before you throw big warning bells. And it will come up with different rules that you can customize. So if you're okay with one error every hour and no more than one error every hour, you can set up that rule here. Sentry is awesome. But a regression means, in software development, a regression means you've encountered a bug, you fixed it, quote unquote, you think you fixed it, and then it pops back up again. That would be considered a regression. And this one is Sentry being real clever. So before this class, I went and practiced what I'm showing you. And I went to the same bug and I hit resolve. What resolve does is it closes the issue here on Sentry. So this is your way of saying, okay, I've seen the error and I've either fixed it or it's just no longer relevant. And if you hit resolve, it will mark it good and it'll drop it off the UI. So if we refresh the page, you won't even see that line through it. So when I was practicing this, I came and hit this error and I hit resolve. It's popped back up marked as a regression because I didn't in fact fix the bug. It's popping back up in Sentry. And down here, it's marked this as a new issue because Sentry has never seen this error coming from my app. The Sentry is really cool. If you guys install it into your app, I promise you it will have a ton of value. Okay. But I'm going to go ahead and resolve these because I'm going to show you what it looks like when we throw an error on an endpoint. So I'll hit resolve, and then I'll just refresh. All right. We have no bugs in our code. So going back to our app, we created this. It resolves that fast, not because I did anything in the code, but I simply told Sentry to ignore those errors and just wipe them off the slate. Stop tracking them. In real life, when you get these errors, you typically go and make a code change and test it and then push it up. So the process of resolving one of these Sentry errors is usually a little bit longer, depending on how difficult the bug is to fix. So in our app, we added this special endpoint to simulate throwing errors. So whenever you call this /error, it's going to raise an error. So let's do that. So our server is running. We're going to curl localhost 3000 on the errors endpoint. Oh, because I just called it error. Error. Boom. Node.js. Error, raising an error. Here's our stack trace. This is, obviously you don't need Sentry for this when we're running locally, but pretend this was deployed up to Heroku and you didn't have access to this terminal where it's clearly laid out where the error is. So now we can go back to Sentry. If we refresh the page, we'll see we have an error from 28 seconds ago. We click into it. It'll show us the exact line where the error is being raised. Okay. And this is some of the contextual information I was talking about. So this shows who is actually calling. So Sentry recorded that the caller to this endpoint was coming from a user agent with curl. So the curl program was making the request. And then it has some additional information. This is metadata that Express provides. So things like what the URL was, were there any query params, what was the status code that Express returned? In this case, it returned a 500. Man, I should get a Sentry t-shirt. They should be paying me to be a brand ambassador for them. That's it. That's all I wanted to show you is Sentry. Again, this isn't a homework thing. This is here's a cool tool for being able to detect bugs in your app. Feel free to wire it to your capstone if you think it would be valuable. If not, it's not going to hurt my feelings. I'm not being sponsored by Sentry.
I have a question, Nathan. This is Latonia. So
Mhm.
when I set up the Express, did you do that because you had seen my code and you figured Express was the most appropriate? Like, do you go through that every time you go to Sentry where you have to pick a new path for the setup guides that they give you? Like, I'm just trying to get a handle on how that works.
You only need to go through the setup guide once, right, to set up your app the first time. After that, you'll get the landing page when you go to Sentry, and it will have your errors. I feel like I missed the question. Sorry.
No, I thought I may have misheard you, but I thought you were saying that the setup guides were tailored to your specific code. And so I thought, like, when I put Express, it's only going to give me stuff that's tailored to Express.
Right.
That's right. Okay. So I guess
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So if you have a different project that doesn't have Express, you just start over. Okay.
Well, if you have another platform that you're using, so they provide a whole bunch of them. Let's say we were going to do it with Python, and we were going to use, let's say, Django. It's going to give me instructions for installing it through Python. So you can go here, and depending on what you're using, they'll try to give you a tutorial for how to do it with that language, with that framework.
Okay.
So if you click on Node.js, they've got a whole bunch of different Node.js ways to do it. It just so happens that Express is a really popular library, so they had a tutorial written for it. If you weren't using Express, they have just a plain Node.js. So for folks that aren't using Express in their backend, you can still install Sentry and capture your Node.js errors. If you're using Express though, follow the Express tutorial, because wiring Sentry to Express will give you all these nice contextual information. Like, it will help plug Sentry deeper into your app to catch more errors. Yeah, you do not have to use Express with Node. You could use raw sockets. You could use raw TCP sockets. You can build your own HTTP server. It's a low-level programming language, so you can there's a myriad of ways to launch a server on Node.js, or an HTTP server on Node.js. I do use this at work. Maybe that's why I'm a fanboy, but like, this has saved my butt so many times. Mainly because it's really, you develop software on your laptop and you think you got everything correct, and you write tests, you make Cypress, you make Jest, you have someone else look at your code, everybody gives a thumbs up, you feel warm and fuzzy. But then you go into Sentry and you find out there's something going on in production. There's maybe some data in the database you weren't expecting to be shaped a certain way. This has saved my butt like a million times, because I can go in here and I can see exactly what happened and be able to go back to my laptop, reproduce the issue on my computer, and fix it. Without this, without tools like this, I would be flying in the dark. Them are fighting words, Jahil. I don't know. I can think of a couple other backends I think are the best. No, I think for sure with Node.js, Express is the clear winner in terms of adoption. And okay, that's it. I'll stop shilling for Sentry. Okay. Now I'm gonna throw something else at you. How many people have seen? Let me go into GitHub and show you this. This is just another one of the repos that I have. How many people have ever seen this check mark in GitHub next to a commit? In fact, let's do this. Let's go to, while we're on the subject of Express, go to Express. So what this check mark means is that this code has been tested. So on GitHub, you can launch servers that run your tests automatically every time you make a commit and push it up. Wish this would load so we could see what Express.js is. There we go. Okay. So this commit means that all of these different tests have run on that code. So has anybody ever heard of CI or GitHub Actions? Travis CI, Circle CI? Okay. So I'm going to do my best to try to explain it, but I guarantee you this is something you're going to see on the job. What this is it's a way to test code as you develop. And instead of, if you recall last week when we were running Cypress and Jest manually in the command line, right, you have this check mark on your GitHub pages because one of the actions that's performed when you push code up to your GitHub is it will publish it to GitHub pages, right? So that's one of the actions that GitHub will perform for you. But what this is it is a way to run automation, run tests, run software every time you make a commit and every time you push it up to GitHub. And by commit, I mean what we were doing yesterday, where we did git commit -am and we were bundling changes on our laptops and pushing it up to GitHub. When you bundle your changes and push it up to GitHub, GitHub can run anything you want when you push your code up. And what most people will do is they will run things like Cypress, things like Jest. And what that does for you is it will free up your time from having to, on your computer, manually run Jest to see if all of your tests pass after you change your code, and run Cypress to see if users can still log into your app and click on the different parts. Instead, GitHub will do that for you. GitHub will run these tests automatically. That process of continuously testing your code, continuously committing, continuously pushing up to GitHub is what's known as continuous integration. And that means that we're constantly developing code and we're pushing it up to services like GitHub. It's running tests and it's giving us a green check mark if the test passed, or a big red X if the test didn't pass. And I'm curious if Express has some red X's as an example. Here we go. Here's some red X's. So these folks are trying to contribute code to Express, and their GitHub Actions, their CI is not passing. So something is wrong with this code that some person is trying to send trying to contribute to Express. And you can see that because all of these tests that are set up on Express are failing, except for this one, which is waiting for some status. Okay. So at a very high level, continuous integration is just a form of automation. It's a way to, as you're developing code and pushing it up, having it continuously be checked, continuously tested, continuously validated, or in the case of GitHub Pages, continually pushed up to the GitHub Pages website. All right, I'm going to show how to go ahead.
I'm sorry. Okay, so this is Latonia, and this might be like a crazy question, but if you have the code in there and it passes the test, then why do you need to continue checking it? Or am I misunderstanding what you're saying?
No, you're absolutely right. The continuous integration only runs on new code. So think of when you make a commit. You can only make a commit when you have changes. You can't make a commit when you don't have anything changed. So you can only produce these commits. You can only push things to GitHub when you have something to push. You can't push nothing. So every time you push new code up to GitHub, whenever you make changes, whenever you make commits, that is when CI is going to run. That's when your tests are going to run. So you shouldn't ever get into a situation where you're testing the same thing over and over and over again, and the code's not changing. It should only ever run when you've contributed new code. Other questions? This is a kind of a hand-wavy topic just because CI means a whole bunch of different things. CI can be used for, like we've said, publishing to GitHub, running tests. It can be used for building things in different languages. It could be used for all sorts of different. Yeah, it's synonymous with automatic. It's this continual process of we're always running these checks. We're always, so it's not a process that you can forget to do. It's automatic, it's continuous. So you can't forget to run your Cypress tests on your new code because GitHub's doing it for you automatically. Okay. So CI has its own language. And I've created this example here that runs Cypress. And I'm going to do my best to explain it, but a lot of this is stuff that, you know, when you get on the job, it's highly unlikely that you're going to need to write your CI from scratch. It's probably already going to be implemented. So the folks that you're joining, your new teammates, they'll likely already have this set up. So it's not so much that you need to know how to write this from scratch, but rather I just want to walk you through the process of how you might build this. So if you wanted to create your own CI, let's go back to Nathan's web store and recall that you could click on all the cards and all the items, and we wrote a Cypress test for clicking on those. Instead of running those tests on my computer, we're going to make GitHub do it for us every time we push new code. So to do that with GitHub, you in your repo need to make a GitHub workflows folder. So I'm going to get out of these examples and go up to the front end for my capstone. Open this up. So to get started using GitHub Actions, you would create a .github folder in your repo at the top level. .github is special, and if you have one of these in your repo, GitHub will see it and automatically detect it and look inside of it for any definitions of jobs to run, of continuous integration workflows to run. So you create a .github folder, then inside of that you create a workflows folder. And then inside of that, this is where you define the code. What should happen when you push new code up to GitHub? How many folks are exposed to YAML files or have heard of YAML? Okay, you guys are all pretty familiar with JSON, right? So think of YAML as a sibling to JSON. So JSON has very specific rules about how you can structure data. You know, you can't have a trailing comma at the end of a list of items. Every key needs to have a unique value. You can't use single quotes, you have to use double quotes. What's other random trivia? I don't know. There's a whole bunch of rules, right, that are associated with JSON. I'm about to show you YAML. Please don't freak out. YAML's not pretty. It's pretty special. Okay, so this is YAML. And I'm going to walk through the different parts of what this YAML file is saying. And all of this is special to GitHub and how GitHub processes CI actions. So don't feel like you need to grok any of this. Again, it's not a homework. This is just getting you used to how CI works. But what this is saying is, in the first line, it's saying when to run this. So you can configure your CI to only run in different situations. Like, for example, if you're contributing code to a repo, you might open up a pull request, if anybody has heard of that. So you can get CI to just run only when a pull request is open. In this case, this on push just means every time you push code up to GitHub, run the contents of this file. Okay. Jobs, that's another GitHub specific keyword, and all jobs is it's a list of the different tasks to run inside of CI. So if we go back to Express and we look at this, so see all the different actions that are occurring here, these are all different jobs. They have quite a few because they're testing all kinds of different versions of Node. Okay, we only have one job. That one job is to run Cypress. The runs on statement says what kind of computer to run this task. So when you push code, GitHub will go and try to find computers for you to run, similar to how we deploy our code to Heroku. GitHub will allocate a server. In this case, I want it to give me a server that has Ubuntu on it. For folks that maybe you all have heard of Ubuntu, but it's just a Linux operating system. And then with GitHub Actions, you can set up these different actions. So this one checks out my code. So when the server starts up on GitHub and it has my changes, it's going to check those out, followed by installing Node, because we need Node in order to run our Create React app. Not actually Node, we really just need npm to do the npm install, but having Node installed is also a prerequisite. Okay, and then this is the interesting block. Again, this is probably not something you're gonna have to come up with from scratch when you go and join a company. They'll probably already have CI set up. But if you wanted to learn more about this, you could copy this uses block, so the Cypress.io GitHub action. And if you go and Google it, there's a whole page of documentation about how to use this action. And it explains, it has some examples. This looks a lot similar to the GitHub action that we're working through. But there's all kinds of actions available on GitHub. And if you have like a specific framework you want to use, like say you want to run Jest, maybe just type into Google GitHub Actions Jest, and well, let's just do that really quick. GitHub Actions Jest. Yep, see, here we go. So here's a Jest GitHub action. So this will run Jest for you inside of CI. So you would import it using this uses statement and then call it. This one's using yarn. We use npm, so you would just call npm test. None of this is stuff you need to memorize, just showing how this works. Okay, this says whenever we push code up to GitHub, run Cypress, this is going to kick off Cypress and run our front-end validation tests. So I will go into here and do a git status to see what has changed. Nothing has changed. In order to trigger our GitHub actions, we need to produce a commit and push it up to GitHub. If we don't push a commit, then CI is not going to run. These GitHub actions won't. So if I did something like git commit -am, please run CI, it's not going to do anything because I've made no changes. Nothing added to commit. So I'll go in here and I'll go to, let's see, pricing. No, let's go to app.js. Let's change in app.js where it renders the title on the front end. Let's, instead of having it say Amazing Web Store, let's just have it say Nathan's Store. That will be our change. Okay. Git status. Okay, so it has detected that we've modified the app.js, so we can go ahead and make a commit. Change the title of the web page header. All right, so we've got a commit. It's on our computer. It's not on GitHub yet, so we need to go ahead and push. Okay, so we've pushed up some code to GitHub. Let's go quickly. Nathan's web store. All right, so it's running right now. That's what this yellow circle means. So that CI is running. Some checks haven't completed yet. That's because it's still running. So we can click on details and we can see it going step by step through those actions that are defined in that YAML. And right now it's running Cypress, which means it's installing all of the node modules onto the server, and then it's going to run /node modules /bin Cypress open. You can see it's running here. So we're running the Cypress test, and it's failing. Oops. Okay, so this is failing, and Cypress is erroring out because it expected to find some content, Nathan's amazing web store. So my Cypress test is failing. If we go back and look at what the Cypress test is actually testing, it's pretty simple. All it's doing is it's visiting the website, and then it's checking to see if the words Nathan's amazing web store are present. That's all this Cypress test is doing. So now GitHub has given me a big red X. So now I know, without having to run Cypress locally, without having to set up my browser and hit the buttons and all of that sort of stuff, now I know that this code is bad. It's not passing my Cypress test. And if we go and look at the GitHub page, got a big nasty red X right there. So the value here is that you can set up the CI, you can set up these GitHub actions to run your tests. And every time you commit code to GitHub, it'll automatically run, and it will tell you within 2 minutes whether or not your tests have passed. So if we wanted to get a green check mark, if we wanted our CI to pass, we can go in and change our title back to Nathan's Amazing Web Store, which is the correct title for this, for my capstone. We can make another commit, so do a git status. We made changes to app.js, git commit. We are fixing the title of our app. Commit, still on my computer, not on GitHub. Now let's push it to GitHub. Oops. Mine is main and not master. There we go. Now we'll go back to GitHub and refresh. We've got CI running again on another commit. If we click on it, it's currently running the code that's defined in that GitHub workflows folder. It's going to run Cypress and hopefully give us a green check mark. The format kind of like the switch loop. No, it's different. YAML is different. I don't know how to describe it. I'm glad that I don't have to teach YAML. It's a weird data language to try to explain, and I'm really not good at it. I usually go online and look for examples of how to write YAML, and I mess it up every time. Okay, so we got a green check mark. Our tests are passing. We didn't have to do anything locally. We just let GitHub run our tests for us. Okay. I threw a lot at you guys. Again, you don't need to memorize this. I just want you to feel like you know a little bit about CI, kind of understand what those green and red marks on GitHub mean. Especially if somebody gets bold enough to go and make contributions to Express. Yeah, make sure you pay attention to these because these will tell you whether or not the changes you made are good or not. Other questions? Anybody think that they'll try this? Explore the world of GitHub Actions? Maybe. Yeah, it's unless you find something that's like a really killer use case. Like Cypress is a good one. Cypress takes a while to stand up. Like let's take a look. To run Cypress, we would do node modules .bin Cypress open. Yeah, and then in addition to opening Cypress, you also have to go and start up the server. So there's that to remember. And then you got to click on the button. I mean, it's still handy to run Cypress locally, especially when you're building your test, because it lets you see interactively if things are working, what's being rendered into the browser. But it also is time consuming. So if you're not writing tests, if you're not actively working on your Cypress, but instead maybe you're just working on functionality in your capstone or your front end, it's really nice to have this set up on GitHub so that you just make commits, you push them up, and then if you get a red X, then you know to go back and take a look and see if you broke something in your code. Okay. Then the next slide is kind of what we talked about, just a little bit of description for what each of these steps are doing. If you want to get into building your own CI, there are awesome documentations on GitHub. I mean, it's a massive manual, and it will teach you from start to finish how to build your own CI, your own GitHub Actions. And then there's this other repo called Awesome Actions, which just has a bunch of really well-built GitHub actions that you can kind of copy and paste. So people that have already built actions for Jest, so you can just copy it and put it into your workflows folder. So if you are so inclined, feel free to check this out. Okay. Let's go ahead. So we're going to do a quick terminal review of some of the commands that we've gone through, just to try to give you one last chance to absorb some of this. This is all going to be referenced, but I'm going to do my best to. There's some new ones in there too. This is Devops module. This is the last day, so I'm going to give you some fun ones. Some stuff that's going to make you look like a hacker, hopefully, and impress computer illiterate folks with your amazing terminal skills. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take another 10-minute break and stretch, do all that kind of fun stuff, and then we'll dig into this last section. Okay, let's come back at 7:25. Caitlin, I should just let you, because every time I have to do the time zone translation in my head, and I'm worried I'm going to look like I can't do basic arithmetic.
It's okay. I mean, I can do it for you if it saves you.
Please,
Seconds.
please. I don't want to lose any cred. We're so close.
Sure, I'll do it next time.
Okay.
I keep forgetting that you're not here also, so.
I'm doing such a good job. I need to have my New Yorker accent going.
So you should set one of those clocks that come up when you like click the date on the upper right-hand corner of the Mac. There's like a bunch of clocks. I've never messed with them, but they have like Tokyo and Sydney, Paris or whatever. You could set one to Syracuse.
Caitlin, do you use GitHub Actions at work?
So we don't use GitHub at work or Git at work. So my job is we primarily still use like .NET applications, and all of those are through like FSC and Visual Studio. We don't use Git for most of the projects. We did use Git on the website project, but I don't recall using like.
You guys don't use CI at all? Oh man, that's hardcore.
It's well, Visual Studio has like all the tracking and stuff built into it through FSC, but we don't use like Git. It's actually quite annoying. I know this is being recorded, but it's fine. I think the goal is to get things moved to Git because it's just more universal. But it's just going to be a process. But yeah, it's yeah. It's annoying for front end development specifically because like when you're doing a React application, like I am now, for example, I'm converting a Java application to a React application, like an old desktop app.
Oh, like Java Swing.
It's just, I don't know. It's just straight. I don't know. It looks like someone threw spaghetti at a screen, and it just is. I can't read it. Well, but I'm on a team that's doing that. It's just a desktop application, but we're converting it to a web app using React, and it's like trying to do JavaScript development first of all in Visual Studio is awful. Because it just doesn't look right. I don't know, maybe it's just because it's not the right colors or whatever, but it doesn't look right. And it's not like, it doesn't detect like the same things that Visual Studio Code detects for JavaScript. So it's just like really hard. But then if you want to do your front end work in Visual Studio Code, which I prefer, there's like this whole scenario where like if you're running the solution and you make changes, it doesn't track the changes because we're not using Git. So like, it's not recognizing them. So you have to like shut it all down and then like then make the changes, then save it, then restart, then reboot the solution. You have to be connected to the VPN, and it's like this whole like it's awful. So I'm just like powering through with Visual Studio right now, but yeah, I miss Git immensely right now.
Microsoft bought it. I'm surprised that they haven't gone all in on like Visual Studio and Git as like a first class.
They really should. I didn't know that they bought Git.
Oh yeah, GitHub, not Git. Like Git was developed by I think Linus Torvald made it.
Somebody.
Yeah, and then GitHub got bought by Microsoft. So all of the all the GitHub Actions that's running on Azure.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
So I guess that makes sense because we use Devops for we use Azure DevOps for the website, which we are also kind of like migrating towards. There's just a lot of tech and technology and applications and projects like across the board in my job. So like it's a slow process, but I'm pretty sure we're migrating all to Azure at some point, which that would make sense then. Which
Azure DevOps is kind of the I guess like the Heroku. It's the simpler, and then Azure's the full-fledged.
Yeah, Azure DevOps I actually loved. Like it was very like intuitive and user friendly and really easy to use as a developer. Yeah, I liked it.
It's the same thing as Heroku, in my opinion. Like it works really well. It's like purpose built for very specific developer friendly things. And then as soon as you need something like Kyle, like as soon as you need to do multiple URL routing to the same app, then the wheels fall off. You're like, I can't do it because the UI doesn't let me do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, to be fair, I was never in charge of any of that stuff either. So
Good, don't be. Then you weren't on the hook when it crashed.
I don't want to be.
I think I thought of a workaround for that for my to put it on my website with my name. If I just publish it on Heroku and use that URL, and then like if I have a nav bar on my personal webpage, and then I found a Stack Overflow thing on how to make React router connect to an external link. So then it would just look like the one page was coming up in my personal website, but it was actually connecting to that weird Heroku URL.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. The only thing that's going to be a little jarring is the URL is going to switch on you when you click the link, but right, because you're going to go from your website to an external website, right?
Yeah, but the URL would change in the. Okay, I didn't realize that it would actually change in the app. I mean, in the, what do you call it? Where you type the URL.
Yeah,
Okay.
it'll change up there if you're going from your content on that website to an external Heroku link. It will.
So it wouldn't keep my nav bar in there.
Probably not.
Okay. I was just thinking back to like the 90s with frames and how you could displace like an external website. And then I was like, I can do that with React Router. Okay.
2021 iframes are the new hotness. Bring it back.
I was just thinking of something more modern because I have nav bars in my capstone, so maybe that's not the best idea. I don't know. Could I just deploy it through GitHub Pages and somehow connect it to my? I don't know. I'm just thinking I don't want to, like, how many cheap names do I want to buy for like every single project when it's just a one-page thing that I wanted to add to my portfolio,
Yeah. I think don't sweat it too much. Like, especially if you're going to use this as a portfolio project, nobody is going to care. An employer is not going to care when they go to look at your portfolio if it's a Heroku app URL.
Okay.
Genuinely, no one's going to care. The only people that will care is a customer if they're, you're selling them something or they're expecting this really rich interactive experience. Dude, if it's portfolio, just do not buy a domain to.
Hey Nathan, this is a question
Hey, Shaw.
about Git. So Git is a open source, but if Microsoft bought Git, so do you still call it an open source? Because you know what Microsoft, do. Who knows? What they do with all the code, everything. What are their intentions for the future?
What's the saying for Microsoft? You could never go wrong buying Microsoft. That's the old IBM tech. No, never mind. Yeah, but GitHub from day one was never open source. So Microsoft taking it over, it's been is that an example of irony? Like, here, give us all your open source stuff, but we're not actually going to be open source. I don't know what Microsoft's going to do with it, but you've seen have you guys seen the GitHub Copilot?
I've heard about it. Yeah, I heard about it. So basically, is it using all our code?
It's trained on all of the GitHub open source repo, and apparently it's also trained. Actually, I might be making that up. I don't know if it's actually trained on the private repos, but for sure it's trained on the public repos. So it's an assistant when you're typing. I think it works with VS Code. You install it through the marketplace in VS Code, and it will try to auto-complete big chunks of code based on what you're doing. So it uses ML to predict what it thinks you're doing, and then it will just like auto-complete like 6 lines, like 12 lines for you. So if you're doing like, a good example would be the homework we did with Jest, where we were doing the addition for adding up all the items and the sales tax and all that. GitHub Copilot will supposedly like simple things like for loops and summing things. It'll just do it for you with ML. It's going to take our jobs away. So I think that's the master plan, is developers are super expensive. Let's just train a robot to do what developers do, and then we can sell. Microsoft will start selling like developer robots, and you just give it like a simple task, and the ML will just spit out a GitHub repo with all the code written.
I mean, I don't know much about this, but I think that's, I mean, it won't happen in the near future because there are a lot of codes, and I mean, Google like Stack Overflow and others, but it's kind of getting the code and also understanding that or modifying and converting. So if it's, I mean, AI gets to that level, yeah, that's a different story. I don't know. Thanks.
All I could think is it's probably a good time to learn a little bit about machine learning, because if we're going to get automated away, maybe we should learn how to automate or work on the ML, contribute to the ML. Join me next year for adventures in Python and Scikit and TensorFlow. All right. So we're going to quickly go through some terminal commands. This is just recapping the stuff we've done. I'm going to do my best to quickly show examples of these, and I'll probably screw up my computer along the way, but that's okay. So Git, I'm not going to show this in the terminal. You guys have seen this already. So Git clone, it takes a URL. I would recommend using the HTTPS version unless you really know what you're doing and have an SSH key set up. But Git clone takes one argument. It takes the thing you want to clone, and when you run this command, it clones it down from GitHub, complete with tracking in that folder, clones it down from GitHub, puts it on your hard drive, and you can CD into it and make changes, the whole 9 yards. Git status. Do not forget this one. This is your freebie. Think of this as you can run this anytime just to see what Git sees. It's super valuable for understanding what changes you've made and in which files. And it also tells you what things Git isn't watching, what things you need to Git add and tell Git to track. Cool, we'll catch up with you. Yeah, we'll catch up with you later. Git commit -am says everything that Git can see, bundle up, prepare it for pushing. I know I've beat this to death, but again, Git commit does not put it on GitHub. It simply packages it up on your local computer. So a common mistake, and why I've just continued to say this over and over again, common mistake is people think, oh, I've committed, I'm done. No, commit bundles it into a little package, which you would then push. And then the difference between Git add, go ahead.
Just reminding you about my previous question, how to commit just one file if you want to do separate comments on them or messages, whatever they're called.
Mm-hmm. So to do that, you would need to be very careful about what you're committing. And I'll show an example of this for folks that want to get into a little bit more of the expert usage of Git. So here we are. I keep using shortcuts. Here we are, Git status. Nothing has changed in my repo. So let's say we want to make some changes, but we only want to commit a couple of those changes. So let me go into WebStorm and let me add a line here, add a line here, add a line here. Okay, so we've made changes in 3 different files. We've just added some new lines. We do Git status again. It's going to say that these 3 files are modified. Let's say we only want to commit the changes we made in app.js. So we want to hold on to the other stuff, wait until later maybe to commit it. We only want to commit app.js. To do that, you would say git add, pass it the file name. Now, if we do a git status, it's going to say that this is ready to be committed. These other 2 files are not staged for commit. That's why they're marked in red. So the green means that this is ready to go up.
And you use the file path from the folder you're in. When you did the git status, it gives you the file path from wherever you are, so you don't have
relative.
To
yep, relative to where you are. Exactly. Good call out. Okay, so quick detour. When we've been running git commit, we've been doing it with -am. The M means to pass in a message. You guys are all familiar with how we go and describe what the change is. I haven't talked about what the A does. We've been using the A because the A will automatically grab every change that Git sees and bundle it into the commit. But A won't work for what we're doing. We're specifically targeting things that we want to push up to GitHub. So we have to drop the A. And when we drop the A, what it's going to do is it's going to look at just the things that you've added and bundle that into the commits. So this is a pro maneuver here. This is a situation where you have something very specific in mind that you're trying to do. So if you want to do that, you would say git commit -m, no A. And now if you do a git status, you'll see that we still have those two changes. So we haven't committed those changes to those two files. Now we can do our git push origin main, and we can push up that commit that's just changed that one file. Hopefully that answers your question. It's a little bit of surgery
or then
work
if you
where
wanted to put the same message on both of those files, now you could do the git commit -am, and that will only add it to those other two files, and then you could push all three of them. That's more like what I would do, because I often, like in VS Code, I'll put different comments on like maybe 3 different files or something about what I changed on each file, and then push them all at once after I've committed each one. Or I keep calling them comments, I meant messages.
comments, messages, same thing.
Yeah, and then, so is our VS Code still going to be pushing to our GitHub as opposed to Heroku if we use that? Or like, how do we know where it's going with VS Code's UI now?
That's why I don't want you guys to use the,
That's why I wanted to learn how to do this in the terminal, because I do like to put individual messages on each one. So thanks.
And it's those kinds of things. Like, I don't know what VS Code does. I don't know how it works with the UI, if it will automatically use origin, or I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, thanks. This was
I will
helpful.
say, if you are disciplined, I'm not saying you have to be hard line. I'm never going to use a GUI application like Beekeeper, for example. It's way easier to use Beekeeper than to work with Postgres using the command line. But Git is different, in my opinion. Git's super tricky, and if you could just have the perseverance and the patience and the tenacity, I guess, to stick with the CLI, you will be rewarded in the long run. You know, and Ryan, I was talking to Ryan Goss about this, and he would be livid if I didn't point this out, but using the CLI also forces you to understand how Git works. A lot of what you get with the GUI glosses over how Git works under the hood, and can lead to a lot of confusion, and can lead to some Shaw moments where you might accidentally set something up and then wipe something because you just trust the GUI to act in good intentions and have your back. The CLI forces you to understand Git, which is a good thing, because as developers, we use Git to communicate our code changes and communicate how we write software. Okay, I beat that to Shaw. I'd say that's more of a, no, you're right. Like, Windows does present like this kind of everything's a GUI, and Linux, on the other hand, you're kind of forced to understand what's going on a little bit under the hood. Yeah, that is a good analogy. Okay, and then the last two. So when you set up your repo, when you clone a repo down, you automatically have Origin pre-installed. Origin is the remote. Origin is GitHub. So when you say git push origin main, it's going to take all your code and push it up to GitHub. If you install that Heroku remote, so if you look back at some of the slides previously and the stuff we did yesterday, when we were deploying, we installed a Heroku remote. If you want to deploy your code, not push it to GitHub so you can track it in github.com, but if you want to push it to Heroku, that's what this command does. And again, just a reminder, it does behave a lot like Git. So you need to commit before you push to Heroku, just like you would need to commit before you push to GitHub. All right, quick recap of the Heroku commands. Some of these you'll recall get run at different times. So like, like Heroku login. Heroku login, you only need to run every once in a while. In fact, since I've run Heroku login many weeks ago, I haven't had to log in again, so it sticks around for a while. Git remote, this Heroku Git remote, you only need to run this once. When you're in your GitHub repo, when you're deploying it, you only need to link your code base with Heroku one time. After that, it should be good, unless you delete the folder or something crazy happens. But this links Heroku with your Git remote and allows you to do things like git push Heroku main. If you're not using Create React App and you're just serving static files, this is the build pack for you. We went over this a little bit yesterday, but just wanted to call out this is the command for installing that build pack. Again, only have to do this once. So when you set up a Heroku app, you only have to upload the build pack one time. Oops. Same thing for Create React App. This was the command that we used for initializing our Heroku with the Create React App build pack. And then we also looked a little bit at the pg-psql command. This allowed you to open up a session in Postgres. If your backend had Postgres enabled, you could use this to drop into the Postgres CLI. Not Heroku pg-sql, just Heroku pg-sql. Okay. Any questions on the Heroku commands? All right, let's get into some fun ones. So these are things that maybe you haven't seen before. So this is HTOP. This is just a DevOps tool that is really handy. You can install it using brew install HTOP. What it does is it gives you a activity monitor. So like on your MacBook, when you run activity monitor, it pops up that window and it shows you all of your processes. This is the same thing, but for folks that like using the terminal. So let me show you what it looks like on my Mac. This is really helpful for understanding how your system is performing. So you can see up here, these are all the individual cores that my computer has and what utilization each core is currently experiencing. So it looks like I've kind of got 4 cores that are running at quarter speed, and then the rest are sitting idle. And then this bar down here shows me all the processes that are consuming the most CPU. So it's this real-time visualization of all of the processes running on Mac. The reason why I'm showing you this is because HTOP can be installed on other operating systems. So if you're working on Linux, you can use HTOP to see how your system is performing. This is really valuable for debugging the performance of other servers. So if you're using something like AWS, Amazon Web Services, and you're using a virtual server instead of Heroku to run your code, you're using a virtual server and you need to debug and see what is the load like on my computer. You can use HTOP to do that. Okay. So that's just a freebie if you're interested in an extra tool to put into your tool bag. The other equivalent of that, a little bit more manual, but is also very helpful, is PSAUX. So if you run this on your MacBook, it's going to print out every currently running process, which can be really useful for finding processes that are stuck. So how many times have folks run npm start and it said that the port is currently in use? Nobody's run into that situation?
No, we've seen that where someone had one running someplace else, and you have to stop that before you can. Yeah, Yeah.
Yeah. So that happens all the time for me. And sometimes it will happen even after I've closed the terminal. It won't successfully have shut down whatever that server is. And it's really frustrating because you just want to start your server up and that port is getting in the way. What you can do with PS, so your option in that case really is only to restart your computer and clear out whatever server is taking up that, that process. But with PS AUX, what you could do is you can run this, and then you can search in your terminal. Search in your terminal to find like node. So here's node running inside of my WebStorm app. You can search inside of all the processes that are running on your computer, find where the server is that's taking up that's still listening on that port. You could find it through PSAUX. And then over here on the left, there's a number right there. So this 3924, that's the process ID. So you could take that number and kill it. So you can say kill and give it the number of that process, and that will shut down whatever is running there. So if you happen to have a rogue process, a rogue server that's still clogging up that port, find it with PSAUX, grab the number that's in this column. If you scroll up to the top, there are column headers up here that will show you what each of these columns mean. Here we go. So see this PID column here? That's the process ID. So every process that starts up on your computer is assigned a PID. And you can take that and feed it into the kill command, and kill will shut it down. Okay, so that's PSAUX. An even easier way of finding something that's bound to a port is to use LSOF-I, and I'll show it here. So if everybody has Postgres installed running on their computer, Postgres starts up and is listening on 5432. So to find what processes are running on a given port, you can use LSOF-I : and then the port. And what it will return is what the name of the program is that's listening on that port, which then, again, you can feed into kill if you so choose. So you can take the PID and say, I don't want Postgres to run, kill it. And going back to the node example, if you are trying to run npm start and it says something's already running on that port, you can use LSOF-I, give it the port, so maybe like 3000. I don't have anything currently running on 3000, but you could give it 3000. It would spit out something like this. You could grab the PID and kill it. So PSAUX is kind of the, here's all the processes, go manually search for something if you want to find it. And then LSOF-I : is the, LSOF-I : 5432 is the, I just want to know what's listening on this port so I can do something about it. Okay. We've already kind of covered this, but this is invaluable when you're on your Mac and working in your terminal. If you are in a folder somewhere and you just want to open that current folder in the Finder window, so you can do something like copy and paste or whatnot, you can say, so let me go into the backend, Nathan's backend store. You can say open dot, and that will open up a Finder window. Just a useful little Mac tip for working with files. You could also say things like open a specific file. And depending on how your Mac is set up, it might like see it's trying to open it up in Xcode for some reason. It's kind of mixed luck with if you pass it a file, what it will do. But every time you pass it open dot, it will open that folder in Finder. Touch is really handy when you're in the terminal and you're like, I need a file right here. So we did static.json yesterday because we need to create a file to tell Heroku what files to serve. Touch is just a really handy way of creating an empty file and then later coming back and filling it in using your text editor or something like that. Cat, has someone already covered this previously?
I think we did Netcat with Ryan. Can't remember if we did Cat, just Cat.
So Cat is a much simpler tool. So in the terminal, if you don't want to open VS Code because VS Code is sometimes a little slow, you could just say cat and pass it the name of a file, and it will print out directly in the terminal what's in that file. This is really handy for situations where you just need to see something quickly. I use it all of the time. So cat takes one argument, the name of the file, and it prints it out to the screen. Okay, I'm going to give you some pro LS moves here. So you've all used LS, but I'm going to supercharge it a little bit. So ls-a, Mac will create what are known as hidden files, similar to Windows. Windows has hidden files as well. It's not a unique concept, but ls-a will print out hidden file. Yeah, DS Store, our old friend DS Store always shows up. Fun fact, DS Store is actually what's created from when you open Finder. So if you have a DS Store, it's because you've opened Finder in that folder. But ls-a will print out all of the hidden files. So all of the files that start with a dot. So when you're, for example, creating your gitignore and you do an ls and you're like, where is gitignore? It's because you didn't pass it the -a, which means list all files. Okay. On top of that, there's also another command called L, which means to list things vertically, which can be a lot more handy for determining things like file size and most recently created. All these are things you can do within Finder, but this is Devops module, so I'm going to show you how to do some terminal stuff. And my go-to command every time I do an ls, I typically don't do just ls, I do ls-ltr, which means to list things vertically by time and recency. So that will put the most recently modified file at the very bottom. If you're working in a folder with lots of recently edited files, -ltr will show you as the last item what the most recently used file is. Especially for like where I do all of my coding, I always create a workspace folder, and I have a bunch of different projects I work on. So finding what the most recent one is so I can go back to it, ls-ltr is really helpful for that.
I'm just curious what those other columns are.
Yeah, so this column is date for when it was last modified. These are the Unix permissions. So if you have used things like chmod, chgroup, you could change permissions on files. And this is the representation of it in a specific notation that I'm blanking on. It's not octets. It's a specific notation for how the permissions are represented. The other two columns are who owns that file on that computer. So the first column is the user. So my Mac, I'm the user. So all the files that get created are going to have Nathan Evans as the file owner. And then the staff is the group. So All files belong to a certain group as well as a user. So these just describe the permissions. And then this last number, that's actually the file size of the folder, not the contents of the folder. So it's a little confusing.
Okay, so that's in what, megabytes or something?
I think it's in bytes, but if you want to get
Just kidding.
human readable, use LTH, which will put a human readable. So yeah, this is in bytes.
Okay. And what's the other column of numbers next to the permissions, between your name and the permissions?
Oh gosh, you're quizzing me.
No, that's okay. If you don't know, it's probably not something you use that often. So then it's not something I really
I'm
need.
ashamed to say I don't know.
Size might be useful sometimes, stuff. So
I don't know, and because it repeats, all my guesses are kind of out the window. I'll tell you what, I will find out after this, and I will never forget because someone asked me, and now I feel embarrassed because I don't know. Okay, that's it for the terminal review. I've got one last fun thing that I want to do, and this is really just talking about more advanced ways to deploy your servers. Again, you don't need to know this, but Heroku really is behind the scenes using AWS. In fact, everything that you do in Heroku is really AWS behind the scenes. What you're paying for with Heroku is for the expertise of the people at Heroku managing all the complex parts of AWS behind the scenes. What I want to show you though is that it's really not as complicated as you might think. Maybe I've contributed to a little bit of fear by saying that AWS is scary and all of that, but it's really not that complex. And to get started with it is really easy. So I just wanted to quickly show folks how to rent a server on AWS if anyone is ever interested in learning more about it. With the disclaimer that you can shoot yourself a little bit in the foot with AWS, and I'll give a quick example before I jump in. When I first got started working with AWS years ago, I signed up for an account with AWS and I didn't make a secure enough password. And hackers got in to my AWS account and they immediately started spinning up the most expensive servers they could, 20-ish something servers. The most expensive, like we're talking like hundreds of dollars per hour. So they spun up like 20 of those and they started mining Bitcoin with it. When I woke up in the morning, because they did this overnight, when I woke up in the morning, my AWS bill was like $10,000. So if you get to playing with AWS, please make sure that you go in and use a secure password when you're setting up your account and put multi-factor authentication on it, just to make sure that nobody can get in. Yeah, Ariel, you've been in the same boat. The customer service was fantastic. They completely waived it, and my heart came back into my chest, out of my throat. They eventually covered me and just wiped the debt. But Ariel, did they wipe it for you? Was customer service? Please tell me you got treated as nicely as I did. Oh man, that stinks. I think I still ended up owing a little bit, but it wasn't $10,000. It was, yeah. So you could definitely shoot yourself in the foot, and that's one of the big reasons why Heroku is nice for getting your feet wet, because you can't make some of these mistakes. But at the same rate, if you secure your account and you be careful about what you're doing, it's really not as scary as you might think. Okay, let's go rent a server. So I'm not expecting anybody to follow along, but if you wanted to do so, feel free to. So you would go into AWS and you would create an account. When you get into AWS, the server portal where you can go to rent and buy servers is under EC2, Elastic Compute Cloud. And you would go into this fancy page, and then over on the side, the term that AWS uses is instances. So Heroku uses dynos, AWS uses instances. Instances represent the servers that you're running. And you would click on instances, and then up here, there's a big orange button that says launch instance. From here, you can select what the operating system, you're spinning up a computer. This isn't Heroku. It's not gonna just, here's a Node.js app and just go run it. We're spinning up a operating system. We're spinning up a virtual computer. So you could go in here, and my Linux distribution of choice is Ubuntu. So I could go in here, type Ubuntu, that's just what I want, and then select this, this server. And then on the next page, this is where you get to choose what kind of server you want. And AWS has this cool program where there's a free tier, kind of like Heroku has with the free dynos. And you can create some specific type. So this T2 micro, this really small server, you can, it's eligible for free tier. There's some conditions, but you can get away with running this for pennies. It's dirt cheap. So if you're interested in learning how to do this, check out the free tier. But they have all kinds of options. Like you can get an 8-core, 32 gigabyte RAM server. You can do anything. And then on the next page, there's just this whole review and launch confirmation, and then you could hit launch. Once you hit launch, it will spin up your instance. So I've already spun up an instance. So if I click on it here, we can see that the computer is running. I chose the T2X large instance size, which is going to give me, it's a pretty big server. And then it's going to give me an address on the internet to be able to connect to my server. Does this look familiar to anyone? Does anybody know where we saw something that looked similar to this?
We saw that in Heroku, didn't we? Because I asked you what
we
it
did.
was, and you had done something with Shaw, and you said it was just them reselling the website.
Reselling, right.
Okay.
So this was the address that we used to connect to the Postgres database. So they were actually spinning up what, just like I went through in the in creating a new instance on EC2. Heroku was doing that behind the scenes, where we went and created the Postgres database and we hit the add-on and we enabled Postgres. Behind the scenes, Heroku was just going to AWS saying, okay, AWS, give me an EC2 instance with Postgres on it. So that's why we ended up getting a direct link to the EC2 instance, is because that's what it was behind the scenes. Once you have your server running, you can log into it. So to do that, you would click connect, and there's all this information about how to connect to the server. So I use an SSH client, which means it's all done in the terminal. And I already have a terminal open here. I'll show you all what this looks like. So here's my server on AWS. I just ran htop to show you all what this looks like. So you can see it's got 4 cores. It's really not doing anything because these bars are not filled, and it has 15 gigs of RAM. So that's the box that I'm currently sitting on. Okay. So this is, I'm logged into this server. It's running on AWS. Now I can run node server.js. Oh, first I need to npm install. So I've rented a server from AWS. I took my backend store code and I cloned it down onto this remote server. So this is the same thing that we do with Heroku, but Heroku does it all automatically for you behind the scenes. When you git push Heroku main, Heroku is really it's managing the server for you. It's taking your code, it's putting it on the server, it's putting it on the dyno. With AWS, we have to do this all manually because this is a server that we control. So I've cloned down the Nathan's backend store. I've installed Node and npm. Now I can do node server.js. Ah, yes, and it's crashing because it doesn't have a database. So we would need to set up Postgres on our server. I'm curious, can we reach this server. So if we go into AWS, grab the name, and then curl it on port 3000, my backend store has an items. If you guys recall, it has an items API endpoint. No bueno. We got to have the database set up on the AWS instance for it to run. But that would be how you would do all this by hand. If you wanted to get into the world of DevOps, the world of running your own servers, and provisioning your own servers, administrating your own servers, that's just a real quick demo of setting up a server on AWS. So to recap, it's logging into AWS, creating an account first of all, then logging into AWS. Their product for managing servers is called EC2. And then you can click this button, launch instance, and it will walk you through those steps that I showed. If you decide to do this, if anybody decides to do this, please make sure to, once you're done playing around on it, to go to your instances and terminate your instance. Oops. Terminate. Because otherwise, you'll leave it running and it'll incur all kinds of charges and cost lots of money. Any questions? Thoughts?
Well, I have a thought. This is Latonia. That just felt very technical to me. The steps seem pretty straightforward, but trying to figure out like what you need when you're in there, like I don't think I would do it. I would have to like ask someone.
It's definitely not
this is a
friendly.
agreed. I think I just made an effective sales pitch for Heroku. This is the complexity that Heroku manages for you. You know, we've got a free tier, a hobby tier, a professional tier. We've got this cute little dino we could press plus minus to get more of them. That's what you're paying for, is you're paying for them to, I don't want to be patronizing, but to handhold you, to let you focus on writing the code and and you pay them money and they'll figure out the infrastructure. So these things are complex under the hood, but if anyone's interested, there is a whole world that you could dive into here, and you can make some pretty good money by learning how to do some of this stuff, because Heroku is at some point, if your product matures enough, if your product becomes complex enough, you might outgrow Heroku, and at that point, you can't pay them any more money. You need to build something custom. So, man, I didn't feel like I'd be doing a sales pitch for Heroku. I don't really like Heroku that much, but there it is.
That's funny. Now, what job titles is that under? Is that still DevOps? Like, I feel like that would be some sort of niche or specialized something and not just this broad title. No, still okay.
No, be like me. Do have the best of both worlds. Be a software engineer and have some DevOps under your belt, so that because the really nice thing about having this DevOps experience and doing what you've done this week, the really nice thing about it is that because you know how the pieces come together, because you know how to push code, how to deploy it, how to go and check the logs, how to check the Sentry errors, how to troubleshoot. The really nice thing about that is that you're in control. You don't need to go and ask somebody else and say, hey, DevOps team, is my app doing okay? Or worse, the DevOps team coming to you and say, hey, your app is breaking. What's wrong with your app? So if you have just a little bit of this under your belt, you have the power to control, to be proactive about things, to know what's going on, to be informed, to take accountability for some of that. Oh, has anybody heard of a Raspberry Pi? Susan, do you have some Raspberry Pis? You're muted.
Oh no, I've heard of it and I'm really interested to learn more because it seems really interesting and I know it like does those mirrors. You can do all these cool things, but I actually don't really know anything about it. I've just heard of it.
That is the gateway drug to learning how to work with servers. It was at least a bit for me because those little Raspberry Pis, they're cheap, but they're a full-fledged computer. If anybody is really interested in DevOps, I would strongly suggest picking one of those bad boys up. You could do so much cool stuff with it, and you learn a lot along the way.
So Nathan, is that a computer? Could you just give like an overview or a summary of what that is?
Oh,
I've never heard of it.
Dude, I can just get one for you. Yeah, here we go. This is my Raspberry Pi supercluster. So each one of these is a Raspberry Pi. So I was running this in a Hive. I had each computer contributing to the same. Anyways, so each one of these, if I can disassemble this a little bit. Well, I'm not. It took me a long time to put this together. But this right here, this 1 out of 3 that you see, it has an Ethernet jack and 4 USB ports. Also has an HDMI over on the side. But they're relatively small, and they're a whole computer. So this whole thing, this 1 out of the 3, this is a computer.
So they're like tiny CPUs?
Tiny CPUs. The new ones have, I think they have 2 cores. I think you get up to 4 cores maybe, but they're really powerful. It's really surprising how much power you can get out of these. Actually, here we go. It's a better picture of one of these. So it looks like this. It's like, and yeah, you can run. It has an HDMI port on it, so you can hook it up to a monitor. You can plug in a keyboard and a mouse. It's all Linux. I think you can even install Windows on some of these, but yeah,
so
they're like.
what exactly do you do with it? Like,
I use it in my house to automate my garage door. So I've taken one of these and I've spliced it into the controls for where the garage door opens. So I can use my phone to send a HTTP request to a server and it will open and close my garage doors. Like the possibilities are endless. Like you could do I have another one of these that's set up with a little particulate monitor, a little 2.5 micron particulate monitor. What are you doing?
I apologize. My dog knows I'm on the computer and not paying attention to him.
Oh.
So he's attacking me with toys. I apologize.
No, that's fine. I was just wondering. You could do a whole bunch with it. There's even like little cameras. So if you wanted to build a server that takes pictures, you could do that. You can get super invested and start learning your own like electronics and running your own wires and learning about capacitors and all that stuff. We're getting way off topic, but if anybody's on the fence and has like a cool $60 just burning a hole in their pocket, go grab one of those. It'll be the best programming experience you'll have.
But like, how do you get started? How do you, like, I'm interested in the camera stuff. Like, so you basically are building your own servers with that?
Well, it's a computer. So think of it like your Mac.
Oh, yeah.
It just doesn't have Mac on it. So it's
a blank slate. You can put whatever you want in there. Oh.
Yeah. So it comes with a Linux operating system, kind of like Ubuntu, if anybody's familiar with that. And if you plug into the HDMI, it will present like a full desktop experience. It's just all Linux. Yeah, people will use them as like a work computer. They're powerful little machines. You get big bang for your buck.
Hey Nathan,
Check them out.
do you ever use virtual machines? I mean, for installing event or servers or other stuff for DevOps or testing softwares?
At home, I use Proxmox for all my virtualization. So I have a server cabinet and I use Proxmox for virtualization. At work, we use Kubernetes. So if you've heard of Docker, we don't do full VM virtualization. We do Docker, which is, Docker. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So there is a utility. I mean, you can use it for DevOps stuff for servers.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I have it.
Yeah.
I use it for Ubuntu just to test some software because,
Yeah, Raspberry Pis are great for testing Linux, new operating systems. Yeah, they're great. They're also really handy for you want to run your code. You don't want to push it to Heroku, but you want to push it somewhere that's not your MacBook just to make sure it works on another machine. That would be a great use case for Raspberry Pi.
thank you.
We're way into fun territory. So if folks feel like they want to drop, feel more than free. We've definitely covered everything that we were going to cover today. I don't have any homework for you guys tonight. I would ask two things though, and I'm not going to grade on this obviously, but the first thing is to please take a look at Sentry. Don't feel like you have to throw it on your capstone, but if you have the time and you feel comfortable enough, please take a look at it because it will save your butt in the long run. And then the second thing, everybody go and buy a Raspberry Pi, please. It is a gateway drug to all kinds of fun stuff.
So it's the core processing power of a computer. So like theoretically, like it's a computer you could just take like from work to home and just like plug into the monitor and keyboard and wherever you were, just carry it around in your pocket,
Yeah, here, let me show you. There's even a Raspberry Pi that's molded into a keyboard. So it looks like it's just a keyboard. Raspberry Pi keyboard. It's called the Raspberry Pi 400. I'll post a link to it in chat. But this is the same thing as, oh, sorry. That is the same thing as this, but with a little plastic keyboard around it. I think you can actually remove the Raspberry Pi from outside of the keyboard shell. I think I haven't actually bought one of these, but like for some coding camps, they'll give students each a Raspberry Pi, and that will be their development machine. Kids in STEM classes, they buy these things by the cartload, and kids will use these to play with. They're really cool. Yeah, you could buy lots of cool cases. I bought this one just because I wanted to practice running a bunch of little tiny servers, but you can get all kinds of cases, and there's all kinds of accessories. Like there's a really cool one that is meant for growing plants. So you can buy the Raspberry Pi, and then it has this little module that plugs on top of it, and you put these moisture sensors in each of your plants, and it will measure the moisture levels in each of your plants and tell you when it's time to water. Oh, thank you, Carolyn. That's all I had, though. If if we want to go ahead and break early, we can keep talking about Raspberry Pis. I see, Brielle, are you still just blown away, or are you looking at something else?
No, I'm looking at the Raspberry Pis and I'm looking at these teeny tiny like full computers. Like they have the screen and the keyboard that I don't think anyone could actually type on because it's too small. Like it's a laptop that's like a Game Boy. It reminds me of a Game Boy. I don't know.
And you want to know what's even crazier? If you've never heard of this, of Raspberry Pis before, let me find it. So you know those little flashcards, those little things? I don't know if it'll focus. Like the little micro SDs. That's the hard drive for these things. So you plug in, you just slide one of these in. So like I've got a 32 gig right here. You just slide one of those in, that's the hard drive. Oh, also, they make multiple editions. This is called the Raspberry Pi Nano. No, Raspberry Pi Zero. So this is the even smaller one. So you've got the big boy here, and then they make the really little one. This is a full-fledged computer. It's like, I think it's only it might be dual core. And then it has like maybe only 2 gigs of RAM or a gig of RAM, but this is more powerful than your hobby dyno on Heroku. And then if you want to get even crazier, this is the last thing I'll show. I'm gonna let all of you go, but they get even smaller when you start getting into the world of embedded electronics. So this thing right here is dual core with a Wi-Fi card. And it fits in the palm of my hand. I mean, we could go on and on. I got all kind. You tee me up. I'll go all day. But I'll stop. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate you guys letting me have fun with the end of the Devops module. I got to show you. Hopefully, I got to show you some cool terminal stuff and maybe a little bit of extra spice for making your Heroku instances a little bit better, a little bit more observable and monitorable. That's it. Thank you guys so much. I will see you guys for office hours on Sunday. And if you need anything in between now and then, if you're having problems deploying, if you're having problems with anything that we covered in the module, just let me know and I'll be happy to chat with you guys.
I had a quick question about that YAML file that you were showing before. So I guess if I was doing that, I would just put the operating system, you put Ubuntu, and I would probably just do that because I know that works. But can you just put Linux in there if you want any Linux server, or is it gonna, like, if you don't put anything, is it gonna? I don't know what it would give you. Would it give you a Windows server and the commands wouldn't work anymore because they're not Linux commands or something? Or
it's owned by Microsoft, so it could very well give you a Windows server. I don't know. But if you go and look at the GitHub docs, it will show you all the different servers that are available, all the different types. But I'll tell you that 99% of all the GitHub actions written on the internet, on Stack Overflow, on the docs, they're all going to be geared towards Ubuntu. So Ubuntu is a pretty safe one to pick.
And I had a
thank you guys.
Quick question. I was wondering if we're done, if you could help me with my back end GitHub repo where I accidentally created the README file and it doesn't want to let me push my back end to GitHub.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Let's see. Ooh, I guess I want to do that one. Sure.
So we're trying to move code into this backend repo.
Yes. So I don't know if you want to, let me put up my my
Yeah, give us a give us that
so-
and give us the terminal too.
So I have in my repository. So the problem is I tried to create a second one when the backend didn't work with the server, but somehow I had connected my files already with the backend, so it still did not want to let me do that. So,
So go to the backend repo in GitHub. We got nothing in there, and that's fine.
So I also tried to maybe just put it up with a zip file, but that didn't work. So I deleted that too. So
got it. All right, terminal time. Let's go see what's happening in that folder.
So I can move this over. All right, so let me think. I want to go to this. And then where do I have it? Let's
see the zips. Do you have a okay?
I made backup zip files just in case things disappeared, and then I actually put them on my Google Drive. Just
very smart.
After what happened with Shaw, I got a little scared. So then let's see. And then it was, so I should go right into my backend file.
Okay. Folder. All right. What's our one thing that we can run anytime, anywhere for free? Cool. Nice. Let's do it. Yeah. Okay. So it sees that you've modified. Wait, what? But there's nothing on GitHub. Okay.
Right.
Do me a solid and do a git remote --v.
Whoops.
Yep, that's right. Git remote space --v. This lists out all of the remotes you have in V.
Did I? Oh, V, not B. Oh, sorry.
V, yeah. Okay, so it thinks it's connected to github.com, /ali, I love CNY -backend.git. That matches. Cool. Okay, so
where's my
let's do a git status one more time. Git status one more time to remind me of what's going on in here. All right, let's do a commit. You've modified some stuff, but it's not staged for a commit. Let's commit. So git commit -am. And dash and the am are one.
Oh, sorry.
One term. Yep. Okay. All right, let's push up. Let's get it on GitHub.
I'm
say
trying to
that
remember.
like this doesn't work.
It doesn't. It throws it back every time. So I think, but I was doing git. Was I doing git push main?
Origin main.
Origin main. Yeah.
Right. Origin means GitHub, and main is just the branch. And we have talked about branches, but that's just the.
Here.
All right.
Here's my message.
So here's what's happened. So it says rejected main to main non-fast forward. What that means is that what's on GitHub is nowhere close to what's on your computer. It means that the two of you are so far out of sync that Git just gives up and doesn't want to go any further. Now you can tell Git, I know what's the right thing to do. You listen here, I'm going to show you how to do this. You can say that to Git by doing the git push origin main again.
Okay.
Except give it the nuclear flag which is -F. Yeah, def force.
I was afraid to do that on my own. I thought I'd break
Shouldn't be.
something.
You've got a zip, right? You got zip. You got
Yes.
backups. You're good.
Okay. Okay.
Forced update. Scary. Okay, refresh the
The
webpage.
status or the
No,
the
refresh
actual,
GitHub. It should.
try again.
So if you go back to the main page and blow this up, because it's just compressing it.
Oh, there's a server and there's models.
There it is.
Yay.
Oh, dude, you put a sentry in
Okay.
there. That makes
So-
my heart so much better.
Yes, I was working on that tonight. So, okay, good. All right. So it's there. So, but I should definitely refrain from using the force command regularly. That was extreme situation.
Unless you know what you're doing. I mean, these are all tools to be used anyways, but I really like what you did. Make a zip. Don't try to do it all through Git. Make a zip, make a backup, and then you can feel free to experiment all you want with Git. And what's the worst that you can do? You
Okay.
nuke it?
Right. I don't know. I feel like I am very capable of breaking a computer. I had a friend when we went off to college and she got a Mac, and I thought she was crazy. And she's like, no, Macs are the best. You know, all my family has Macs. And like the hard drive on her computer failed like 5 times. It had to like go back in under warranty. It was the worst computer ever. So I feel like I
When
could
they're
definitely
bad.
do that to this computer.
No, you're not gonna screw up Git. And if you've got a zip, you're good.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So
there we
you
go.
need to deploy, right? That's your next step.
Yes. So I've been working on my front end, and I was failing to compile errors, and I have a meeting with Max to take care of that tomorrow morning. But I basically commented out almost my entire front end code except for the basic outline of the front page, the home page. So I should be able to post it, but I have not done that yet.
Okay. We'll just holler if you need a hand.
Okay, will do. Thank you so much.
Don't feel bad. I did the same thing with most of my front end. After trying to bring it into React, everything broke, and I
Right?
wasn't able to
Yes.
fix it. So I'm getting help with that over the weekend too.
No, yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Except how do I stop share? It says new share, but stop share. There we go. All right. Thank you.
I'm curious, Nathan, about I'm just trying to organize all these terminal commands in my mind, and I'm wondering what the dash means. Like, I know -S means save. We saw -L tonight. -A is for selecting all the things in the like when you're committing everything. Is there any relationship between what those are, or
No.
why you would need a
No,
dash?
because each program is different and the arguments that each program accepts are different. So just because ls takes -A to list all files, that has nothing to do with git commit -A, right? They're different programs. So each program defines what flag. That's what takes, honestly, the longest to learn and build up that muscle memory is like LSOF, for example. LSOF takes a -I and a colon and a number. No other command I've ever seen on Unix takes -I and then expects a colon, and then they're weird. So it's just repetition, muscle memory. They are not related with each other. Some of them are, but not enough for you to, in your head, go git commit -A. Oh, that's the same as ls-A. Every program's different. All the flags are different. Write your own command line program. Node.js will let you do it. Make your own flags. You'll see it. Everybody writes their flags different.
You don't show me right now. Maybe you could send me a link or something. We're at time, so I'm just curious though.
Cool. Okay, I'll let you guys go. I'm gonna post a link in Slack, in Slack. Check it out. This is hopefully where it'll kick off your imagination with Raspberry Pis, because this is a bunch of cool stuff you can buy. All right, I will I'll see you guys all. No, I'll see you guys all on Sunday for office hours. Have a great day off tomorrow. Do something that's not related to computers. Decompress.